I arrived on a Friday night at dinner in Amman, Saturday morning crossed the Allenby Bridge, or the King Hussein Bridge, depending on which side of the bridge you live on, and went to Ramallah. And I met with all of the leaders of the authority. And one of the leaders, I won't say who, said to me, you know, the trouble with the Israelis, he said, the trouble with the Israelis is they never stop negotiating. They're always negotiating. I listened, I said, well, you know, it's only natural. There's lots to negotiate about. That night I had dinner in Jerusalem. The next day, spent the full day, Sunday, meeting with many, many leaders in Israel. One of the leaders pulled me aside, and he said, you know, the trouble with the Palestinians, they never stop negotiating. As a mediator, this filled me with great hope. You have two people, powerful, intelligent, committed, engaged, tough negotiators. But wherever you have that situation, we as natural mediators in Canada, we should understand the situation. People, of course, they're negotiating. There's nothing wrong with negotiating. But we have to understand what the stakes are and what the objectives are. Another thing that I heard consistently in the region that not enough Canadians know about is that in the Palestinian Authority on the West Bank, Canadians are building up the capacity of the future state of Palestine. I suspect there are not many people in this hall tonight who know that Canadian soldiers, without any publicity, without any attention, Canadian police officers from the RCMP, without any publicity, without any attention, are providing vital assistance to the Palestinian Authority to be able to provide the peace and security for the region that is so necessary. The men and women who will ensure the security both of the West Bank and of Israel. I suspect there are many people in Canada who don't know that we are, and I say we, I mean the Harper government, with the support of the opposition, are providing the money to build courthouses and to train justice officials in the Palestinian Authority. Not enough Canadians know that Ramallah itself is a bustling city, that the growth rate on the West Bank is now 8% per year. I say to my friend Mr. Comper, there aren't many countries in the world today that are experiencing an 8% growth rate. And I say to all the people in this room, you should all know the words of General Dayton, who was the general in charge of this great effort for security on the West Bank, who said two things to me. One thing he said, first of all, you have to understand, President Abbas is not Yasser Arafat. And the second thing he said is that he and his Prime Minister are doing a truly remarkable job. And the third thing you should know is that every Israeli official that I met with said exactly the same thing. The remarkable job that is being done today in the Palestinian Authority. Our support as Canadians for the partition of the British Mandate of Palestine in 1947, and it was a Canadian judge who cast the deciding vote in favor of partition, Mr. Justice Ivan Rand, who was a judge of the Supreme Court of Canada. That is a decision that led to the creation and the recognition of the State of Israel, whose right to sovereignty and whose right to security is quite correctly a pillar of Canadian foreign policy. And I would argue, with great respect to some others, that this is a pillar that transcends party politics, that transcends partisanship. But I would also say that that same logic, that is to say that a partition means two states on either side of the partition, means that Canada has to be as steady and as consistent and as loyal a partner to the new state of Palestine as we have been and will always continue to be to the State of Israel. The Arab Peace Initiative that was reconfirmed to me by 2 Egyptian ministers and by Abu Musa of the Arab League means that an Arab world that was long unreconciled to the creation of Israel is now prepared to recognize the permanent presence in the Middle East of a home for the Jewish people, a state that for too long has been treated as an outsider. Let me make very clear to all of our friends here tonight that I am not for one single moment underestimating the difficulties ahead. There are far too many voices unwilling to accept the rights or even the existence of the other. And we hear those voices virtually all the time. Religious intolerance, terrorism, and simple bigotry remain terrible, terrible diseases of the human spirit. But I believe that tonight it is worth recalling the words of Yitzhak Rabin when an initial agreement was reached with the Palestinian leadership. And this is what he said in the fall of 1993, and I'm quoting from his words: "Enough of blood and tears. Enough. We have no desire for revenge. We harbor no hatred toward you. We, like you, are people. People who want to build a home, to plant a tree, to love, to live side by side with you in dignity, in empathy, as human beings, as free men. We are today giving peace a chance and saying again to you, enough. Let us pray that a day will come when we will all say, farewell to arms." As President Clinton has written very recently in the New York Times this week, and I'm quoting from him, Prime Minister Rabin was a hard-headed idealist. His great gift was to keep the public's trust while taking measured risks for peace. This approach was best reflected in his own guiding principle. He would work for peace as if there was no terrorism, and fight terrorism as if there were no peace process. My friends, in all the meetings that I had in the last week, in my very, very direct discussions with leaders in Israel, in Egypt, in Jordan, and in the Palestinian Authority, I was overwhelmed by this sense of frustration. People want peace. People are adamant for peace. They know there is no alternative to peace. President Abbas looked at me directly and he said, "Mr. Rae, please tell your people that we in Palestine are committed to peace. We reject terrorism, we reject extremism, we reject religious fanaticism, but we insist on a recognition for our rights. And if you say to me what will happen if that does not come, I say to you, there will be no violence, there will be no terror, there will only be a continuing quest for peace." We have no choice today. Israel has no interest in being an occupier. To be a country of occupation is a contradiction to being a country of democracy. I'm sure that Deputy Prime Minister Meritor would not mind my saying what he said to me at breakfast just this last Sunday, when he said, "Israel's moral position depends on our being a democracy. If we maintain an occupation, we cannot maintain our moral integrity." Those were his exact words. Some people say, well, you know, when people tell you things, they're kidding, or they're negotiating, or they're putting forward a position, they're putting their best face forward. I've learned long ago that actually, no, that isn't always or even often true. When people tell you things, they tell you things for